You think the worst is losing something precious. The truth? The worst is coming home and discovering the world you built has been boxed into trash bags, and a glossy for sale sign is planted in your front yard like a verdict. I arrived at dusk, the kind of late summer evening that makes everything look softer and crueler at the same time. The rental's engine ticked and cooled. My suitcase thudded into the trunk. My phone flashed a dozen missed messages from colleagues and 2 from my mother. I remembered, for a fragment of a second, my partner's laugh in the way the dimming light hit the front porch. Then I saw the sign. For sale, call now. It was crooked, stupidly proud in my lawn as if announcing someone else's triumph. I stopped the car a long way from the house, like stepping back from a bad photograph. My throat went dry. In the driveway, black garbage bags, dozens of them, were stacked in patient rows, the kind you see after a move or a clean break. One bag had split open and my mother's chipped Florentine vase, one of the few things she'd given me, peeked out like an accusation. I should have called first. I should have texted. I didn't. My keys were in my pocket. The streetlight buzzed on. From behind the bay window, our living room looked hollow, the silhouette of the sofa like a ghost that had lost its memory. A message on my phone vibrated the way it had when I'd been out of range for days. Short. Clean. Unknown number. Come inside. Z. Claire. My legs wanted to run. My hands steadied. The front door opened before I reached it. Claire stood there, a shadow against the light, a scarf tied like a question around her wrist. Her hair was pulled into a careless knot. Her eyes were rimmed red in a way that told me she'd stopped pretending this was manageable a long time ago. You should have called, she said, and her voice was thinner than I remembered. You should have left a note, I said. My words sounded flat in the kitchen's open air. She stepped aside. The smell of lemon cleaner and stale air freshener hit me. The house looked abandoned and staged at once. Photographs, our photographs, were gone from the mantel. The framed wedding picture we'd refused to display more than once had been unframed, its glass missing. Clothes in garbage bags lay on the living room floor like mute witnesses. How long? I asked. She didn't answer at first. Instead, she reached for a glass of water, hands trembling like someone about to play a part she could never undo. This morning, she said finally. I packed what I could. I called the realtor about 10. I put the sign up at noon. My mouth went dry. You put a sign on our lawn, I repeated. You who signed the papers. She looked like she'd been asleep in heavy armor. I didn't sign anything. Not yet. Not legally. I asked Marcus to help. He said he could make it happen. Marcus. The name landed in the kitchen like a dropped plate. Marcus Talbot, artist, gallery owner, the man who had come to our wedding, smiled like he owned someone else's happiness. My stomach pitched. You left my things out here like trash, I said. You used his name like a key. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Claire's voice broke. I didn't want to humiliate you. I wanted you to wake up. Wake up. The words were a burned offering. I had been in another city for a week, San Francisco, a show that ate 6-hour conversations and gave me accolades I stored like coins. I'd told myself I worked for the both of us. And the truth I'd paid for with air miles had been that I was rarely home. Claire had tried to tell me over dinners that dissolved into email checks. She'd tried to slip notes into my suitcase I'd never found. She'd tried patience until patience became a hollow shelf. Tell me everything, I said. I wanted facts because they are the things you can use. She told me the way the ocean tells you its weather, slowly, with small admissions that built into a storm. A chance meeting at a gallery opening. A man who asked how she was, and then listened like she was the only voice in the room. A compliment wrapped like a map that led to Marcus. And then Marcus with offers, better dinners, an ear, promise of something cinematic. He was a helpful hand at first, she said, someone who read poems in the margins of her anxieties. He said we deserved more than tolerated company. She had, in a moment of exhaustion, leaned into the warmth he offered. He said he could help me sell the house quietly, she said. He said I wouldn't have to upset anyone. He said, Claire. My voice clipped. You can't sell without me. This is joint title. You need my signature. She looked at me like the answer had been obvious. I thought if it looked real, you'd be forced to stop travel to come back. To be present. If the house was on the market, you'd see what we were becoming. So you forced my choice? I said. You boxed my life on the porch and expected me to react on cue? It wasn't supposed to be a box, she whispered. It was a shove. A shove. That was the gentlest explanation for a ruin. I found the realtor's card in one of the bags. Talbot and Pierce Realty. Marcus's name on one side. A number in a neat hand. I dialed it the way you dial a hospital and hope for the best. Marcus answered like a man who'd rehearsed this moment a dozen times and somehow always landed the better lines. Adam, he said, the single syllable heavy with uninvited intimacy. You're back. Why are you selling my house? I asked. We're not selling yet, Marcus said, as if that absolved him entirely. Claire asked for help. She wanted out of an arrangement that left her invisible. I offered options. You offered to erase my life, I said. He laughed short, clinical. You're dramatic. She's not erasing. She's reclaiming. She deserves to be seen. What he called being seen felt, to me, like being erased. Marcus had the relaxed stance of someone who knows the angles of other people's weaknesses and walks through them like open doors. I had always liked him, once, because he made jokes about my terrible cooking and praised Claire's temperate laughter. Now he came to the house like a man who'd placed a flag. That night the neighborhood hummed with a rumor that felt like an illness. Tom Jenkins from 2 doors down brought over an extra folding chair, and an expression like he'd been following a soap opera. Mrs. Alvarez from across the street pressed a plate of empanadas into Claire's hands like a peace offering, and said she was sorry she'd ever invited Marcus for coffee. But stories are hungry things. Marcus arrived at 9 the following morning with an envelope, a tight smile, and a confidence built on private investment brochures. Money, he believed, greased the gears of life better than truth. If you sign, he said to Claire, we'll move fast. She looked at him like someone standing on a cliff and reading the map backward. I don't want to hurt him, she said. You think you aren't? Marcus replied, cool as a knife. This is not about punishment. It's about giving both of you the freedom to choose. He was not a lover of freedom. He was a lover of outcomes shaped by his wallet. I called a lawyer. Laura Henley answered, practical and quick, her voice wearing the kind of calm you can buy with experience. Don't sign, she said. Not without me. Claire can't sell without Adam if the title is joint. You have options. Options? I said the word like a promise and a threat. I did not know then how a plan could become a kind of revenge without being vindictive. How to take back control without burning the house down. I only knew that my life sat on the porch in garbage bags and someone, Claire Marcus, had set a fire I needed to understand. The first thing I did was small and mean in the neatest possible way. I filed an injunction. It bought time. Time is currency, especially when someone moves on impulse. Marcus was a shark in shallow digs. His appetite was quick and ill-considered. He wanted to close quickly. My legal hold made that impossible without his showing real proof that Claire had voluntarily relinquished ownership. Second, I talked to Claire. We sat at the kitchen table where the light came in like a confession. She cried, then steadied, then confessed the loneliness that had crept into the margins of our days. You left for work, she said simply. You built your life into trips. I felt like I was shouting into an empty room. It was true. I had been proud of my career. Proud until the pride looked like an absence. I had been there for launches, dinners, awards. I had not been there for the small things that matter. An ankle sprain, a Tuesday when nothing happened. I had scaled mountains and missed the path. That night I did something I'd never done before. I canceled a flight. I sat at the dining table and turned my laptop closed like a book finished in shame. I said the words I'd avoided. I'll be here. It wasn't a magical cure. Marcus still called and left messages, each one lengthier in promise and shorter in humility. He showed up at the house once with brochures and wine and a glib plan for how the neighborhood could be improved. I met him at the door, not angry but controlled. We'll handle this legally, I said. You will not bulldoze our life for your portfolio. He smiled like someone about to bet on horse race odds. You're in the way, Adam. You should be grateful she found someone willing to listen. You've made a wager, I said. And I'm collecting the receipts. I started to gather facts the way a man might gather pieces of a blown watch, careful to see which gears were missing. It turned out Marcus's record included unsavory flips and partnerships with developers who liked to clear neighborhoods quietly. One name kept surfacing: Robert Kent. He had a reputation like a shadow with pockets, swift transactions, quick flips. He'd bought at rock bottom and sold at a sigh. Marcus's gallery had been a front, or perhaps a funnel. Deals circulated through the small talk of wine and patronage. When I confronted Marcus about Robert Kent, he blinked and then smiled the same thin smile he used at openings. "Bob likes opportunities," Marcus said. "But that's not my concern. Claire wanted out. If someone is pushing her into a bad choice so they can cash out, that is everyone's concern," I replied. The next move was quieter. I found a contractor who owed me a favor, hired an inspector on the down low, and scheduled a pre-sale inspection. A house with compromised wiring or a foundation complaint is less appetizing. It is not sabotage, it's honesty. When the inspection came back with issues, old wiring in the attic, a small but expensive to fix subsidence pocket, the offer Marcus had waved like a trophy began to look like a liability. He called then, furious. "You're playing games," he said. "No games," I said. "Just the paperwork that keeps property honest." We negotiated 1,000 small things and one huge one: Claire's choice. She left our home for a little while. She stayed with a friend, then with her sister. She was both terrified and relieved to have space. Marcus's calls became less frequent when the house needed repairs and investors smelled paperwork and risk. Robert Kent, if he'd ever been fully attached, grew cautious when legal holds and inspection reports complicated his spreadsheet. It wasn't victory like a scene in a movie. Real victories are quieter. They arrive as tiny shifts. Claire and I began to talk again in ways that didn't sound like a board meeting. I started returning from trips earlier, asking questions about nothing, learning her newly favored coffee blend, and the way she liked the blinds closed on rainy mornings. I suggested counseling, not because we wanted someone to fix us but because we needed a translator between two people who had stopped hearing. Months passed. Marcus retreated into events and openings, a little chastened, his appetite tempered by people who refused to be bulldozed. Robert Kent moved on to neighborhoods that were less populated and more profitable. Profits roll like tides. The for sale sign came down the week after the inspector's red flags were made public. Someone had removed it in the pale gray of dawn and left a note: "For sale, withdrawn," taped to the stake, as though the neighborhood itself had exhaled. What remained in the quiet aftermath was the work of paying attention. Claire and I stitched our days back together with mending thread. Small dinners, shared groceries, a vow to go to therapy on Thursdays. We didn't move past everything like flipping a page. You never just flip the pages of a life that's been shredded. You glue and tape and reweave. One evening, some time later, she placed a small plaster angel on the mantel. It hadn't come from the box on my porch. It had been bought at the shop on the corner, where we once argued about what color to paint the guest room. She set it there and didn't speak for a long time. "I wanted to put something back," she said finally. "Something unbroken." "I don't know if we will ever be the same," I admitted. "Nor do I." She reached for my hand. "But I'd rather be different together than stay quiet apart." We married the practical with the intimate. We installed a lockbox for important documents, and set up a schedule for nights where phones were off and dinners were just for us. We fought later about the most human things: forgotten anniversaries, anxious nights when one of us wanted to retreat. But the house became a patient place where two people learned the hard language of staying. Marcus appeared at an exhibition 1 year later. We nodded at one another across a crowded room, and nothing in either of us matched the old warmth. The neighbors were kinder for having seen the story, and decided to guard their own thresholds with a little more attention. Sometimes, when I walk up the path, I glance at the place where the for sale sign had been. The grass has grown a shade greener there, as though it remembers someone planted something in its soil. I hang my keys on the hook by the door. I pour coffee and listen to the kettle sing. The rubbish bags are a memory, a theater of pain that taught us how to rebuild, if we wanted to. If there is a moral, it is not simple. You cannot bind the human heart with rules and expect it to remain. You cannot demand immortality of a relationship that is starved of attention. But you can decide to return when you find the wreckage of your life scattered by someone else's impatience. You can sue and fight and outlast a speculator's smile. You can call a lawyer and call a contractor and call a friend. But none of those things stitch a marriage back together the way showing up does. The hardest and most heroic acts, I learned, are ones that look small. Turning your laptop off, listening without planning your defense, learning the color of coffee someone else likes and making it for them. I do not claim to be the same man who left for San Francisco. I am, in some ways, better and more ashamed of the ways I failed. Claire is not the same woman who stood on the porch with a scarf around her wrist. We are both versions of ourselves that have survived crossing a field of glass. We choose now to guard what matters. The plaster angel watches us from the mantle, unbroken. Sometimes Claire and I sit with a cup of coffee and count the small mercies. No lawsuit, no foreclosure, just two people who managed to stay. We are not perfect. We are at least present. If you ever drive up to your house and find your life in black trash bags and a sign that reads for sale, don't panic and don't let pride decide. Call someone who knows the law. Call your friends. Sit down and talk about what you want. Breathe. Decide what you will fight for. And remember that asking for attention is not a crime. Nor is showing up. We saved our house. We saved our life in pieces and reassembled it like a puzzle we were frightened of finishing. It wasn't heroic. It was work. And in the end, work was the only thing that saved us.